Locked in a steel tube and sunk hundreds of feet into the ocean, the submariners of World War II were some of the most likely military personnel to be killed in action. Submarines were critical in the success or failure of just about every naval operation of the war. In this video, we're diving into the most effective submarines of the Second World War, revealing the overall best submarine at the end. We're starting with Japan here, which by far had the most diverse submarine fleet the world had ever seen. The Imperial Japanese Navy had submarines for attacking ships, submarines for moving supplies, midget submarines with a two-man crew, one-man suicide submarines, and even aircraft carrier submarines. The best of all these variants? That was the Type B1, derived from the earlier Gato-Class subs. With a range of over 25,000 kilometers and a payload of 17 torpedoes, these vessels were a serious threat. The Type B1 even had a hangar on board, from where a seaplane could be launched via a catapult. Used for reconnaissance, this aircraft would locate enemy ships for its carrier sub to hunt down. Even though they were widely successful early in the war, Japanese submarines all had the same fatal flaw, a strategic flaw. Japanese Naval Command saw submarines as an addition to the surface fleet, not as hunter-killers. This meant that Japanese subs only attacked warships and never went after merchant vessels. As the warships were well defended and often had air cover, this tactic became more suicidal as the war went on. Toward the end of the war, Japanese commanders began using submarines to resupply land forces, further wasting their potential. Their tactics unchanged, Japanese submarines became easy prey for US fleets from mid-1943 onwards. While by 1939 Britain no longer ruled all the world's oceans, British submarines were a potent threat lurking under the surface. The most successful were the British U-class submarines. These had a range of 8,500 kilometers and carried 10 torpedoes. With a length of only 58 meters, these smaller submarines were highly maneuverable and proved to be perfectly suited to the confines of warfare in the Mediterranean Sea. The majority of these submarines were based in Malta, where the British launched continual raids against German and Italian shipping. The most successful raider was HMS Upholder, a U-class submarine that sank nearly 100,000 tons of enemy shipping, including an Italian destroyer. Upholder also attacked U-boats, emerging undamaged from submarine versus submarine combat 3 times. The survival chance of a submarine during the Battle of the Mediterranean was low, and Upholder was lost in August 1942. Impressed by her actions, British High Command made the following tribute. The ship and her company are gone, but the example and inspiration remain. Sadly, this was the fate of many British submarines. The U-class's success in the Mediterranean caught the eye of other navies, and by the end of the war, these submarines had been operated by the Polish, Soviet, Norwegian, Free French, and Dutch navies. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, "The only thing that ever frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." As the most produced submarine in history, the German Type 7 U-boat was what kept Churchill up at night. 703 Type 7 U-boats saw service during the war. From June 1940 to February 1941, U-boats were the bane of Allied fleets. They worked together in small groups called wolf packs, attacking at night. Just like wolves, they would stalk their prey at a distance while remaining undetected, lining up a killing strike. Each of the wolves would then attack in turn to ensure a confirmed kill. With a range of over 14,000 kilometers and a payload of 14 torpedoes, the Type 7 U-boats inflicted massive damage on Allied shipping. In a way, the Wolfpack doctrine was the Type 7 U-boat's greatest weakness. As Allied technology improved, Wolfpack radio signals began to be intercepted by Luftwaffe and tracked by surface radar. If they were in range of the coastline, the U-boats had just minutes before Allied aircraft were overhead and lining up a bombing run. It's no surprise the Americans built the biggest and most heavily armed mass-produced submarines of the war. Their hugely successful Gato-Class submarines were armed with 24 torpedoes and had a range of roughly 20,000 kilometers. The workhorse of the US submarine fleet, these vessels annihilated Japanese shipping in the Pacific. The Gato-Class was extremely versatile, and of the 77 that were built, many became famous. Here are just 3 examples. USS Harder, which sank 4 enemy destroyers in a single attack run on a Japanese convoy. USS Cod, which rescued the crew of a Dutch submarine stranded on a reef, the only sub-to-sub rescue in history. USS Wahoo, which battled an entire Japanese convoy near New Guinea and sank every single ship. And the USS Albacore, which sank the brand new Japanese aircraft carrier Taho, the flagship of the Imperial Japanese Navy 3rd Fleet. While these submarines were hugely successful, they were armed with one of the most unreliable torpedoes of the Second World War. The Mark 14 torpedo was plagued with issues. It ran too deep, it didn't always explode, and worst of all, it sometimes ran in a circle back toward the submarine firing it. Bigger, better armed, and able to operate at a much further range, the German Type 9 U-boat was the big brother of the previously mentioned Type 7. As they were more expensive to build, only 194 of these subs steamed out to fight in the Second World War. The Type 9 was well used in the Battle of the Atlantic. Working in wolf packs alongside the Type 7s, they added to the growing pile of cargo ships now littering the Atlantic seafloor. The main benefit of the Type 9s was launching attacks at range. One famous U-boat, U-123, sank 8 merchant ships in waters off the coast of the US. U-123 fought at the edge of a maximum 22,000 kilometer range and only returned to port in occupied France once she had fired all 22 torpedoes and ran out of shells for the deck gun. U-123 went out on 12 patrols and ended her career having sunk over 200,000 tons of Allied shipping. The Type 9 U-boats are serious contenders for the best submarine of the war. Like the Type 7s, however, they were hamstrung by a lack of safe bases to rearm and refuel. As the Allied armies pushed into France and Allied aircraft began dominating the skies, the U-boats were left vulnerable, costing many sailors their lives. After the Americans saw the deadly success of their Gato-class submarines, resources poured in to improve them even further. The result was the Balao-class submarine. With a range of 20,000 kilometers and a payload of 24 torpedoes, the main improvement over the Gato-class was a reinforced hull which boosted the dive depth to 120 meters. One of the most successful Allied submarines of the Second World War was the Balao-class USS Tang. Tang went out on 4 patrols and sank 33 enemy ships with a combined weight of over 116,000 tons. Successes like these didn't come without a price though. While evading a Japanese destroyer, Tang dived until the gauge bottomed out at 187 meters. Luckily for the crew, this got them out of range of the Japanese depth charges, but it was also 67 meters plus below the maximum depth a Balao-class submarine was supposed to dive. Submarine warfare is a dangerous game, and Tang's luck eventually ran out. In 1944, on her 5th patrol, Tang fired a defective Mark 18 torpedo at a Japanese convoy. This torpedo circled back around immediately and hit the submarine, blowing apart the aft section and causing massive damage. This one faulty torpedo destroyed the highest scoring Balao-class submarine of the war and killed 78 crewmen. Before we give you our opinion on which submarine was the most effective of the war, let's take a quick dive into one of the strangest submarines ever sent into battle. The Japanese didn't reserve all their suicide attacks for their army and air force. Oh no, they had kamikaze submarines too. Named the Kaiten torpedo, this 15-meter long tube was essentially a standard torpedo with a larger engine and room for a pilot. The Kaiten was plagued with issues, like exploding when water got into the engine, which often happened when the submarine went underwater. Unsurprisingly, the 2 original designers of the Kaiten were both killed in separate prototype tests. 420 Kaiten were built, and 100 of these were launched on suicide missions. They likely caused more damage to Japanese forces than the Allies, as the Kaiten launching submarines had come very close to the surface, making them extremely vulnerable to detection and attack. The Kaitens did have one major success, however, sinking the USS Underhill along with 112 crew on the 24th of July 1945. That was 6 of the best and one of the worst submarines of the Second World War, but which class was the most successful? We have to say the American Balao-class is the clear winner here. The impressive dive depth, range, weapons loadout, and ability to remain submerged at a low power for 2 days gave the Balao-class submarines a tactical edge that their skilled commanders used to decimate Japanese shipping. In fact, the Balao-class submarines were so successful that one is still in service today. USS Tusk, launched in July 1945, served with the US Navy for 28 years before being sold to Taiwan. Upgraded and refitted, the Balao-class submarine, now known as ROK's Haipao, is still fully operational as a hunter-killer submarine of the Taiwanese fleet. Long, hard, and full of seamen, those were the best submarines of the Second World War. Do you agree with our choice for the best? Think we've missed one out? What do you think it would be like to serve in a German Wolfpack? Let us know in the comments section below. And just before you guys jet off, make sure you check out some of our links in the description below. If you want to listen to the music we used in this video unobstructed, check out our Relax Jack music channel. You can even use the music for your own creative projects. If you want access to an exclusive video per month, make sure you consider donating to our Patreon. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on Discord, where you can chat to myself and other history buffs. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new.